incident to review for last month as well. Okay, so for our wins and good catches, so we have two here. So teamwork and ladder safety. So while a worker was breaking flanges on a ladder using a rad gun, a teammate proactively assisted by safely handing tools up to them, reducing the need for unnecessary climbing or reaching. And then proactive spotting. So we have a worker preparing to back into a parking spot, was immediately assisted by a colleague who stepped out of their own vehicle while on break to act as a spotter and ensure a safe park. And then we have a couple more here. So some good catches in action. Key hazards identified and addressed. So we have blocked access point and sub-trip and fall hazards. Ongoing demolition work buried a building access point under a debris pile of concrete and rebar, creating severe risks of tripping, twisted ankles, or impalement. So the action that was taken is an excavator operator immediately paused work to clear the walkway. The crew was instructed to strictly utilize designated walkways rather than walking through debris, and the operators were reminded to actively maintain clear paths going forward. So great catch and good communication on that for everybody as well. Unanticipated structural collapse and exclusion zone breach. So this was a hazard that was identified during high reach demolition of a parking structure, parapets wall, a large upper section of precast wall unexpectedly failed and collapsed. The falling concrete breached the established no-go zone, crushing and damaging several sections of the site fencing. So action taken was the area was safely cleared of debris and the damaged fencing was removed. Because the precast sections proved to be poorly anchored to the building structure, future phases will utilize expanded protection, including heavier jersey barriers, additional protective mats, and full sidewalk closure. Furthermore, the excavator operator altered their processing technique to break the concrete into smaller, highly controlled sections. So definitely good catches on that in identifying it as a bigger hazard and making plans for future work that we're going to expand those no-go zones and protecting the public as well. Is there anything you wanted to add on that? Anybody on this call? Yeah. All right, we'll move into emergency preparedness. So evacuation and assembly. So when it comes to emergency preparedness, emergencies often happen without warning, and workers may only have seconds to react. Whether it's a fire alarm, a chemical release, or other urgent situations, workers must already know what to do. Evacuation planning is not something to figure out in the moment. It must be understood ahead of time. So that's why we do annual drills, but you can also do them even more. You can do them quarterly. You can do them for each site as you go to different projects to make sure that people are prepared and familiar with the process, because the last thing you want is somebody learning again when an incident or like an emergency takes place. What does evacuation mean? So evacuation procedures are designed to remove workers from danger as quickly as possible. It's important that workers don't delay or try to finish a task before leaving. Once an evacuation is called, the priority is getting them out safely, not securing tools or equipment or completing tasks or us trying to grab belongings and things like that, right? You can waste precious time and seconds. We need to be able to safe it out and drop things and move out of the area. Evacuation routes should be clearly identified in every workplace. However, during an emergency, the primary route may not be accessible. Workers should always be prepared of an alternate route so that they can adapt quickly if needed, right? And we've seen that in the good catches and whatnot with clearing pathways, having designated walkways, because you never know when somebody will be passing through or needing that. So it's always important, and knowing secondary routes as well. Having signage posted if necessary, like indoor, outdoor can vary, but knowing what the routes are, having signs, and if we're in buildings with multiple levels, then avoid using elevators. Assembly points. So after evacuating, workers must go directly to the designated assembly point. This allows supervisors or emergency coordinators to confirm that everyone has exited safely. Leaving the assembly area without permission can create confusion and delay emergency response efforts. So it's really important that everybody muster together. You'll see them in a number of different parking lots, whether you're on an oil sand site or different client sites or within a building. There's always a safe assembly or muster point somewhere designated, usually outside the building, that we should all be going to and waiting for further instruction, not going to our vehicle or going down the street to the store, to the convenience store or something to kill time, is that we're all staying together and waiting for further direction. So stop and think scenario. So we have an alarm sounds, you exit the building and head towards the assembly point. On the way, you notice a coworker heading back toward the building to grab their phone. What should you do? Anybody want to answer that real quick?
Stop them.
Ben,
Stop them.
Do you want to tackle them? Take them down?
Maybe.
Absolutely.
Right? Whatever means necessary. Yeah, no, you want to stop them and you want to make sure that they understand, like, once you've left the building, like, you don't go back in, but you leave those things behind, right? So making sure that they're not going back in, you're not going back in, and that you're heading to the assembly area. Okay. And then we also want to let supervisors know if somebody does head back that way or they're not listening or something, right? So we want to make sure that people are aware of the proper procedures and protocols to follow. The worker responsibilities during an evacuation. So every worker has a role to play in a safe evacuation, right? So we want to make sure that we're leaving the area immediately. We're not hanging out and waiting. A lot of times when alarms sound, sometimes some people think it's a drill or a false alarm and they'll wait it out until they start seeing people run or move or wait for that that direction from a supervisor. But we're always training people that if you hear those alarms, like, you evacuate, you start heading there and bring people with you, right? Follow your designated routes or pathways. Make sure that you're taking the safest route. Assist others if safe, so helping coworkers, and again, like, grabbing people on your way and making sure that they know where to go. Report to the assembly point, so just making sure that you are going to the muster point and not to a vehicle or somewhere else or to another building or something, is that we're all going there and waiting for that head count, waiting for that direction from emergency response, and then staying to make sure that everybody's accounted for, because you can see who's there and see who maybe is missing that hasn't been accounted for yet, and maybe you know where they are, or it can help get help to them faster as well. So key takeaways: evacuation procedures only work if everyone understands and follows them. Taking a few minutes to learn the routes, assembly locations, and can make a major difference during emergencies. And anytime we're going to any new projects or sites, or we have new workers with us, is don't assume that they know the emergency protocols, right? The emergency phone number, is their emergency response on site, or are we calling 911, what the phone numbers are, where the muster points are. If you've ever taken any type of safety training or an orientation, usually that's the first thing that gets mentioned right at the very beginning, is the emergency protocols, where you're mustering, assembling, where your emergency exits are. So just make sure that that is clear to everybody. All right, now, so we have our group participation time. So what should a worker do when an evacuation alarm sounds? So we have finish their current tasks, collect personal belongings, leave immediately using the nearest safe exit, or wait for further instructions inside. And I see a few people on here are responding. we'll give it a second. 12 people. That's some good participation. Oh, now, why didn't it come up? The poll isn't showing, so we have 14. So I guess I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I want to say that everybody is saying C, we leave immediately using the nearest safe exit. And if you're not, that is the proper answer. Leave first, right? Okay. And next question, what is the purpose of an assembly point? So to store equipment, to allow workers to take breaks, to account for workers and receive instructions, and to wait for transportation. So I see people answering.
It bounced back to your last question there, Courtney.
Oh, did it? Oh, sorry. It's very sensitive for some reason. So what is the purpose of an assembly point or muster point? So I know a bunch of you guys are answering for some reason that is not popping up on the poll for me on my screen, but the answer would be C, leaving immediately using the next. I'm sorry, it just keeps sliding over back and forth. So to account for workers and receive instructions. Okay. And then the last question here. So why is it important not to leave the assembly point until instructed? So we have make sure we have a bunch of responses in here. So make sure it's safe to return so that everyone is properly accounted for. Make sure everyone is accounted for. Head counts, making sure everyone's accounted for. So I do see a theme, and absolutely, we want to account for every single person, right? All of the below, so somebody read. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for that, guys. I'm glad we're all on the same page. We're looking out for one another, right? Okay, moving into our next topic. So oil and gas. So this is the checklist fatigue. And I know with all the inspections and forms that we have these days, it's very easy for us to take those shortcuts and kind of just check a box so that we're able to move forward, right? But they all serve a purpose, and we want to make sure that people know why it's more than just checking a box, right? And things that we can do to help us with reducing that fatigue. So when routine becomes a risk, checklists are a critical part of oil and gas safety systems. They're used for inspections, pre-job planning, equipment checks, and more. However, when tasks become repetitive, there is a risk that workers go into autopilot and stop actively engaging with the process, because it's very easy to check a box versus walking over to something and physically verifying, right? And to take those shortcuts, then we start rushing and we don't actually check, and we just assume, oh, it worked great before, or it looked good the other day or last week. I don't think there's an issue, and we'll check the box. And then later we'll find out that there was an issue or something wrong, which could have led to an incident or something like that. Okay. What is checklist fatigue? So there's a definition there. Checklist fatigue occurs when workers stop actively thinking about each step, treat the checklist as a formality, and focus on completing it quickly instead of correctly. So two very different things there, right? Checklist fatigue doesn't happen intentionally. It develops over time as workers become familiar with the tasks. The danger is that the checklist becomes a box ticking exercise instead of a meaningful safety tool. Why it happens? So when workers perform the same tasks repeatedly, it's easy to assume that everything is always the same. However, conditions can change even slightly, and those changes may introduce new hazards. And we're not always the ones, like the only ones there, the only ones on site. We have things happening, changing, different crews, different work areas that it may have worked well once there, and maybe somebody else was using a tool, right, or a piece of equipment at some point, and now it's somebody else jumping in there, and you don't know what happened in that time. And maybe something did get reported or an incident happened. So it's always good to verify for yourself that things are proper. And if they're not, that you're not checking the box and you're reporting that. So other reasons is repetitive tasks, right? The time pressure. So we want to save time by kind of rushing through it, or we have the tight deadlines sometimes. Overconfidence. So nothing has gone wrong before. We've never had an issue with this. So why are we going to take the time to check it or inspect it? We'll just check the box and say it's good, right? So complex checklists, sometimes if they're too long as well, they get very confusing, and it's really hard to focus on it if you have 30 boxes to check, right? And some things could be condensed down as well. So then we sometimes take on shortcuts by skipping over some stuff. So the hidden risk. So the biggest risk is false confidence. One of the most dangerous outcomes of a checklist fatigue is believing that everything is safe simply because the checklist is complete. So the false sense of security can allow workers to go, or sorry, allow hazards to go unaddressed. We also can have equipment issues being missed, unsafe conditions will continue, and risk increases over time. So just an important note there is that a checked box doesn't always mean safe. From my experience, it's always a trust but verify type situation for anything. So there is an incident here that we've included. So this worker's name is Chris Spilsbury. So in 2025, he was a veteran worker in the oil sands. Oh, sorry, very sensitive. So he was a veteran worker in the oil and gas services. Chris was performing a task involving high pressure equipment when a catastrophic failure occurred. A component that should have been secured or bled down failed, striking Chris and causing fatal injuries. Stored energy at thousands of psi does not care about the paperwork. When the mechanical bond was broken, the energy flowed through the path of least resistance through the equipment Chris was holding. So the three-layer breakdown, it says here, the company, the safety system was compliant on paper, but didn't account for the reality of the fatigue and the repetitive tasks in a high-pressure environment. When it comes to culture, a get-it-done mentality meant that pencil whipping was known, but unspoken practice to keep the job moving. And on an individual level, a veteran worker relied on his experience and memory instead of a fresh physical verification for the specific task. So the physics of pressure, if a checklist says a line is depressurized, but no one actually checked the gauge, the person opening that flange is essentially holding a loaded gun. So when it comes to Chris and his family, is that his family lost a husband and a father, right? Because a routine task became fatal. So the paperwork said the job was safe, but the equipment had the final say, and a checklist is a guide for your eyes, not a replacement for them. So don't sign your name to something like that. Is again, trust but verify. Other notes here is that complacency kills, right? He was a veteran worker, and we see that a lot happen in our industry a lot, is the more experience you have, and if nothing went wrong, we assume that nothing will ever go wrong, but they do. And they can happen to anybody. So he was capable, he was experienced, but checklists and having to do them time and time again, we start finding those shortcuts, and that led to his fatality. The mindful check, so just making sure that you're challenging yourself at this point, after this meeting, you're going to go back to work. And if there's any type of document or checklist that you guys do on a regular basis, is try to find one thing that maybe we could modify, that we could check, or start asking questions of it more. Like maybe you've noticed a form that has certain things that doesn't apply. It's like maybe we can make an update and get it removed or change it or make it more user friendly. So I do challenge you guys to assess those forms and look for opportunities to improve it. And last note here is 5 minutes can save a life. So no one felt that they could pause to verify the gauges because of the pressure to keep the rig moving. That 5-minute pause could have brought Chris home. So sadly, these kinds of incidents are happening all the time. Last year, we had 155 fatalities in Alberta alone, and the year prior was 206. So, and there's an average of 1,000 fatalities happening in Canada every year. So there's definitely things that we can learn from through other people's experiences. So stop and think scenario. So a worker completes a pre-use inspection checklist quickly at the start of their shift. Later, a piece of equipment fails due to an issue that should have been identified during the inspection. What went wrong? The checklist was signed, the box was ticked, but the equipment was never truly inspected. So we have the scenario highlights how easy it is to miss hazards when inspections are not taken seriously, and the checklist list itself isn't the problem, it's the way we use it, right? So discussion points here is that, we have rushing through a checklist. We're prioritizing speed and getting it done instead of actually being thorough. We're not physically verifying items. Again, trust but verify, visual scan, hands-on confirmation to say like if it was good, if it's good or not and functioning properly. Relying on habit, so our memory, right? We used it once before, it was fine. Could have been a day ago, it could have been a week or a month. We can't keep relying on those habits and treating it as a formality. So as long as the box is checked, we're good to go. We don't physically verify. As long as the paperwork's done, that'll be enough, right? So making checklists effective again. So want to reduce checklist fatigue, right? It requires a deliberate shift. And like I already mentioned, is if there are checklists or forms that you guys are using that have things on there that doesn't apply or doesn't sound right or could be improved in some way and whatnot, please bring those to our attention if we can help on the safety side of things. But even internally, if there's other ones for QC department or HR department or whatever that looks like for you, is that you're speaking up and kind of working together in a collaborative way to improve it and make it more user friendly so that more people will want to use it and do it properly. Some other helpful tips are to slow down and focus and actually read what the checklist says, the questions that are on there, and make sure that you're intentional on completing it, that you're physically verifying things, that you're visually inspecting, testing, checking them out for yourself. Treat each inspection as unique. If we always go in with the mindset like, oh, nothing ever changes, everything's always good, guaranteed fresh set of eyes, someone coming out there may start asking questions or see things differently. Is approach it not from using it before and it worked fine, is test it out like it's brand new to you again. Speak up and ask questions if something doesn't seem right, or you're unsure, or maybe you don't know exactly how to inspect or check a certain tool or equipment or area or something and you need a bit more guidance. Talk to somebody about it so that you can get that coaching. Okay. So workers should approach each checklist as if they're seeing the equipment or situation for the first time, and taking those few extra seconds can make a significant difference in identifying hazards and also correcting them. So your final takeaways are checklists are one of the most effective safety tools available, but only when used properly. Workers play a critical role in making sure that these tools actually improve safety and they're not just a document. Because imagine if you were asked to go do an inspection with a blank piece of paper, right? A checklist gives you those triggers to check everything that's around you, but to help us make sure that we don't miss anything. If you went out there with a checklist that had 15 things, versus a blank piece of paper and had to just go look around, they would look very different, right? So a checklist is meant to be an effective tool, but only when the person using it uses it in a productive way. So questions here. So what is checklist fatigue? So we have completing checklists too slowly, skipping checklists entirely, going through checklists without actively thinking about each step, or creating new checklists. A, B, C, or D? And I see people responding, but my Slido is not working perfectly today. I apologize. So I'm just going to call somebody out here real quick. Who did I see? Oh, Tyler. Do you want to answer this question? A, B, C, or D? Are you there, Tyler?
Yeah,
You
sorry,
are.
I'm just driving right
Hi.
now, so I figured I would
Oh.
just be listening instead of inputting stuff while I'm driving.
Oh, I apologize.
Oh, it's all good.
Did you happen to hear the question since I have you talking?
No, I just jumped back in the truck.
Okay.
I'll jump in for Tyler to keep it moving here. We're gonna go with
All
C.
right. Thank you. We're going to go with C, going through checklists without actively thinking about each step. And that is correct. Thank you, Dylan. All right, what is the biggest risk of checklist fatigue? So increased paperwork, false confidence that everything is safe, slower work processes, and fewer inspections. So who can answer this one for me? Arlen?
D.
B, false confidence that everything is safe. That's correct. Thank you. Okay, and last question here. So what are some ways workers can stay engaged and avoid rushing through checklists? So we got the responses coming up here. So slow down, do the checklist, bottom to top, change the routine. Ooh, I like that idea. Definitely. You don't always have to go right in order. Certain sections, you can kind of go through it in different ways. Actively engage with each item. Yes, by walking over, physically verifying. Collaborate with coworkers while completing. I think that's a great suggestion, is it shouldn't always be left up to one person, is more eyes the better. So doing it in teams, right? Different perspectives, different experiences can offer a little bit more insight to that whole inspection process. And it's good coaching and mentoring for people as well. All of the below again. Thank you for that. And take time to verify the actual state and condition of each item. Absolutely. Like, you want to cover your butt. If you're filling out a checklist, you're putting your name on it, you want to make sure that you know what you're talking about, what you're saying is truthful on there. You definitely don't want it to come back at you and say like, hey, you checked everything was good. And did you physically verify? Because if something does go wrong, you may be asked to provide more of an explanation of how you checked it, how you inspected it. Like, did you actually verify versus I assume it's good because I never had an issue with it before, right? So definitely you want to make sure you're covering for yourself as well as anybody else that it actually works the way it's supposed to. Awesome. Great responses. Thank you, guys. All right, we're moving into field discussions and issues. So we have a few things here from the field. So topic one is demolition control and exclusion zones. So the demolition of structural components carries the risk of unpredictable structural collapse. During recent operations, a large section of an upper wall gave way unexpectedly, overwhelming the established exclusion zone and the damaging rental fence and boom panels. This highlights that structural integrity cannot be assumed, and exclusion zones must account for the worst case trajectory of falling objects. So our engineering controls, operator must adjust demolition methods, so changing how concrete is processed to intentionally break materials into smaller, more manageable sections rather than letting massive components fall intact. Dynamic exclusion zones. Perimeter boundaries must be adaptable. If a structural element is found to be poorly anchored, exclusion zones must immediately be expanded, utilizing heavier physical barriers like jersey barriers, topped with fencing, and protective mats. Public and pedestrian safety. High-risk demolition adjacent to public areas requires advanced permitting to completely close sidewalks and streets, ensuring pedestrians are entirely isolated from the strike zone. So definitely some good learnings from that situation. So question here, if a structural component is discovered to be poorly anchored during demolition, what is the most appropriate immediate action? We have continue processing the concrete faster to get the wall down quickly before it falls on its own. Pause operations, expand the exclusion zone, and implement heavier physical barriers like jersey barriers and protective mats. Stand near the perimeter fencing to visually monitor if any more debris hits it. Rely on standard mesh rental fencing to catch any further structural collapses. Okay, I see a few people. I don't know if my poll is going to come up, but Ken, do you want to answer this one for the group? Ben, pause operations. Definitely, I mean, we've already touched on that from our learnings, is that's what we plan to do going forward. So yes, we want to make sure that we're stopping the work, right? Expanding, we're assessing what happened, and we're putting in better controls when we identify that. Thank you. Oh, this one does show up. 100%. And last question here. So in your opinion, what is the most effective control to prevent falling structural debris from endangering public spaces during street adjacent demolition? So we have complete sidewalk and street closures secured by advanced municipal permitting. The excavator attachment is to only process materials in tiny bite-sized pieces. Utilize heavy physical barriers like jersey barriers combined with protective blasting mats, and increasing the number of ground spotters watching the perimeter. Okay. Awesome. I don't think we can say that anybody is wrong on this because they're all great controls and it's all based on your opinion. So good variety there, definitely. Good to see that everybody's kind of on par with utilizing any one of these at minimum, but completing sidewalk and street closures secured by advanced municipal permitting. We definitely want to keep people safe, right?
That does not always save everything, though. You have to have all of them in place.
Exactly. 100%.
That one is you can have a sidewalk closure and street closures, but we have numerous people that do not pay attention to signs and will actively walk right through your work areas regardless. And there's nothing you can do to stop them. So you have to be with the excavators and with the physical barriers and with the added spotters. But even with the spotters, they tell those people to cross over to the other side of the street. A lot of times they will not listen to you in our situation. So be aware. They don't always listen to you.
Absolutely. And that's why we have multiple layers of controls in place, right? Not just relying on one thing, is there's got to be multiple things in place to protect people one way or another.
Yeah, because the street signage and stuff, it's not even just homeless we have wandering through. It's people that are not. And it's like they're oblivious to what's in front of them. So
yeah. Well, and you know, for lack of better words, but some people just feel entitled when they're out in public and walking down public streets, right? Like they feel like, hey, this is my route. I can pass here. And so that's why like we have to be looking out for their well-being no matter what. So yeah, but it can be a hard thing to manage, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
I know, I'm sure there's some other colorful words we could use, right? Next one, so topic 2, equipment spotting and coordinated signals. So backing heavy equipment into tight zones creates severe blind spots. In a recent positive catch, a spotter recognized their own blind side, proactively asked a nearby worker to assist and verify who was in control of hand signals before resuming work. Request assistance. So if you lose sight of a hazard or a blind spot, stop the equipment and get help from a teammate to clear the zone. One signal person. Multiple people gesturing causes chaos. Only one designated person directs the machine. Helpers feed info directly to the lead spotter. And pre-movement alignment. Operator and spotter must confirm the designated signal person and the emergency stop command before tracks or wheels turn. So some good reminders there. So next question here. When you are brought in as a secondary spotter to monitor the blind side of a backing machine, what is your primary operational responsibility? Immediately take over and start giving your own hand signals directly to the operator. Monitor the blind spot for clearance and communicate directly to the primary spotter, leaving them in sole charge of signals. Maintain your distance and trust that the operator can see you in their side mirrors, or use loud verbal commands to shout direction over the sound of the engine. What do we feel like is the appropriate answer for this one? Remember, you're the secondary.
Number 2.
Okay. Number 2, monitor the blind spots for clearance and communicate directly to the primary spotter, leaving them in sole charge of the signals, right? And you always got to put yourself in other people's position. If you were being given direction, do you want to hear it or see it from 2 people, 3 people, 5 people? Like you want to hear it from one person, right? To make sure that it's clear. So there we have it, 100%. All right, last question. So what do you feel is the biggest barrier to maintaining a strict one signal person rule in our active crews? So high background noise level that tempts bystanders to yell or wave frantically, sun glare, dust, poor sight lines that make it hard for the operator to see a single spotter, lack of pre-movement planning before the operator and spotting team before the machine starts moving, and third-party site traffic or pedestrians crossing directly into the active backing zones. Okay, so this is a poll to see how we feel or what our biggest barriers are. We got a few people answering. So far, lack of pre-movement planning between the operators and spotting team before the machine starts. And I think, you know, with this one being the highest so far, is that's within everybody's control. Is if that's an issue, any one of you guys can fix that by having a conversation and asking questions, right? So the pre-movement planning is a conversation. Know where that equipment is going, know who's going where, who's the spotter, getting that clarification, right? And if there are additional hazards, like how are we navigating this situation or these overhead power lines, or you know, like overhead obstructions or ground conditions, anything that might affect that movement, is we can do a better job at having those conversations on site if that is our biggest barrier, is that any one of you guys can fix that. So awesome. Thank you for your participation on that. One last slide, and this is our incident review before we wrap up. So our description, so this happened on April 20th as a near miss. During a demolition project, a worker was manually repositioning a 2-inch water hose for dust suppression. As the worker grasped the hose to pull it, an uncapped detached needle that was concealed under the hose punctured the worker's glove and contacted their finger. The worker was transported to a medical facility for baseline testing and evaluation. So some of the causes noted here are the needle was detached and hidden directly beneath the equipment being moved, making it difficult to see during routine activity. The work area is accessible to the public during overnight hours when perimeter fencing is retracted. This allows for the introduction of foreign materials or debris into the zone before work resumes the next day. High traffic areas near public sidewalks present an increased risk for the presence of discarded medical waste or drug paraphernalia. While the top of a syringe was visible, the area was perceived as safe and the presence of a separate detached needle was not anticipated. So our corrective actions for moving forward is implementing a mandatory visual sweep and zoned clearance walk of all expanded work areas immediately following the morning fence setup, distributing a bulletin outlining the 4-step response to needle pokes, so wash, report, medical, and test, and ensure all staff are aware of the location of Narcan kits, and ensure dedicated sharp containers are available on site for the safe disposal of any hazardous medical waste found during inspections. So unfortunate that we had to deal with that kind of thing, but it's good to hear that we're going to be a little bit more prepared going forward. So now open discussion. If anybody has anything they would like to ask, bring up, share. Sasha, I'll throw it over to you if you have anything.
Nothing really new to share, Courtney. Just wanted to touch on a couple of things. Obviously, some more wins and some more positives for the discussion. Again, we just recently finished that turnaround shutdown for AltaGas out in Hermatin. Lance and I had the pleasure to go out there and meet the crew out there in the last couple of days and do some barbecuing and met a lot of the clients out there. Super positive feedback. Kudos to the crew out there. Obviously, we've talked to them all individual, but it's just those are the feedbacks and those are the kinds of stories we want to share. Again, there's more wins within Boom right now, but that one is a big one to share. A lot of moving parts on that, a lot of people on that outage, and for a new client to Boom. So again, it's worth noting everything went well. Again, there's always glitches when it comes to outages and turnarounds. It's how the crew managed that and how the job finished is the important part here and a lesson learned, obviously. So kudos to everybody involved in that project, and thanks for getting that finished off safely and again on time. And the client just has nothing but good things to say about that. So just wanted to bring that up. I know we've been picking on Arlen and his project here in the city, not because it's a bad project. It's just there's a lot of moving parts there. A lot of stuff that can go wrong, and there's a lot of crappy stuff that goes on in the city in that area. So we're definitely not picking on just one project, but yeah, thanks for bringing all those things up, and most of the slides were regarding that project. So yeah, that's all from me here, and thanks for putting this together, Courtney.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for sharing that, for sure. That's always good to hear when clients are happy and things are just going well, right? Anybody else have anything to share? If not, we can call it good and you guys can have the rest of your lunch. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day/week. And we'll see you again next month.
Sounds great. Thank you, Courtney, and thanks everyone for joining. I know you sacrifice the lunch hour once a month, but I think these meetings are definitely great for that. So thank you.
So no problem. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thanks. Thank you.